Good evening, everyone. Let's try to wait more students to join the session, and we can start later.
L09.
Hello, everyone. I think we can start today's session. I understand some students are still on the way. So maybe if you have any questions, and perhaps you can let me know later. I'm going to share my screen. And also, if some students are on the waiting room, if I cannot see the screen, do let me know and send me a reminder, because sometimes I'm fully concentrated in talking, so I may miss some of the contents or messages. Okay, let me try to share my screen. You can see the screen, right? Good. I can see the messages. Because there are 2 weeks which has been, shifted and swapped between me and my other colleagues. So I would, before we say extend the final other lectures, we still have 2 more lectures. And this one is housing bubbles. This was scheduled to last time, but we're going to do this time. Okay, trying to make this in the... Today we are going to talk about housing bubbles. Well, as you might be understand before we start, some of you might understand housing bubbles means, a bit of similar with how the property price will have the subprime, phenomenon, which means the price of the house does not really, be evaluated as it seems to be. So which means that we see quite a bit of housing, or the units did not really worth the price is labeled. That's the from phenomenal level of the housing bubbles. I once read a book like this, or they have a very interesting introduction and starter here. In China, sorry, there's a student coming. Since the we just say this one, sorry. China has really accelerated their, urbanization process in the rapid, in the past 30 and 40 years. And Wade Shepherd, he wrote, space and about the China's urbanization. In particular, the title is Ghost Towns in China. This is here how he start the conversation. Wait a minute. As I walked, I could hear myself breathing. I could hear my boots hitting concrete, and the wind lowering, and the little else. It's just describe the way he feel about the space. It's a silence that makes China's ghost cities so startling. There are skyscrapers, high-rises, shopping malls, the billboards, and the parks, but the absence of masses of humanity pouring through them makes it all seem like a life-sized version of the little plastic scale models of cities that are proudly displayed in the offices of architecture firms. There is something about these places that your senses detect as being false, but your rationale tells you that it is all very much for real. according to Wade Shepard. And the urban spatial restructuring. So here's some of the urban spatial structuring space, the formation and some representation of the space. And we have seen quite a lot of new towns and new districts in the urbanization process in the past 40 years. And in the meantime, as we all know, that China has become the manufacturing center of the global factories, as we said, is global factory. So there are a lot of science or industrial parks that has been built up, as you can see from the middle part of the, the space. And we can also, in the meantime, in a lot of Chinese cities, we have seen a lot of inner city renewal. And that is how the urban spatial restructuring occurred in the China sectors. In 2008, we have met the global financial crisis in the contract with the Great Leap Forward. We all understand that in 2008, the breakout of global financial crisis, Hong Kong also has suffered from very, serious financial crisis at that time. I have once got some colleagues who have purchased a house just before 2008, and suddenly they gone bankruptcy. So at this context, China actually has launched a package of crisis counteraction policies, among which are increasing efforts in urban built environments investments. So this is 2008. And there's a structural surplus of special set supply. As you can see, the below photos, that the urbanization of the built environment in China has inevitably exceeded their actual consumption capability of local societies. And this has really led to the structural surplus of special asset supply, in particular in the third or fourth tier cities. So as you could see, the space restriction and surplus of the supply of the special assets that really has expressed as vacancy and a lower use rate of assets. So the accumulation of the local debts and financial risks also remains, as that's how we see a lot of towns has been produced. We say the production of space. Well, in the meantime, on one hand side, there are a lot of rural communities that standing on one side. On the other hand, you can see a lot of vegetables and grassland has been growing. So people did not even move into the ghost towns before the cities have a lot of production and consumption spaces. And even there's no shopping mall space which has been arranged. So that's why we name this as a supply surplus of special assets. There is once used to have a very important scholar, name is David Harvey. He has published a paper talking about the space reproduction and production that has really met, the urbanization of a lot of maximum economists to think about why and how this kind of surplus of special assets has been produced and reproduced, talking about, that's the urban renewal. That's how we look at the inner city has gone through a renovation of the, city space, So I won't give you a theoretical context or understanding about this aspect. For one thing, that the theoretical issues really touch two different issues. The first one is capital switching. Second one is speculative urbanization. So this has been done by three scholars. One is David Harley and Leif Bro and Hu in Hong Kong. And second, the school of scholar is planetary urbanization. The last one is sustainable urbanization versus housing and urban bubbles. So these are the theoretical parts of the understanding of the context by the sustainable and speculative urbanization. And once we go to the second circuit of capitalist accumulation, so we could see that this has made the levee of urban built environment or urban built environment development a round of great leap forward of urbanization of the built environment has really taken place in China. And this has been serialized by David Harvey in 1982 as the second circuit of capitalist accumulation. So we can make it as excessive liquidity of, the one that we have shown, that we made it a kind of excessive in terms of asset liquidity within China's SOEs. And for the excessive liquidity globally, that is also another fix and refix of the capital switching. And this would name it special fix and refix. So if we try to give a speculative urbanization in China, according to Leif Bro in 2003, as a principal circuit, that of industry production backs off from the expansion and flows into property, and the capital waste in the secondary sector of the housing industry. The speculation, the point of speculation has henceforth become the principal source. And the almost excessive arena of the formation and realization of surplus value. And the secondary circus has become, apparently a supplements or become one of the important supplements for the primary circuit, and by then becomes essential to the majority sense. And according to Hu, that China's urban revolution differs from the experiences of the post-industrial West, because both the circuits reinforce each other's advancement, while the state monopoly of financial instruments has provided the governments and state, and in the meantime, the state-affiliated enterprises like SOEs to tap into the necessary finance. Well, if we really made it specific to China, and then we can try to give the investment another kind of Chinese context, that is, investment in fixed assets and the built environment has been a quick solution to ensure the GDP growth. So that's why we say infrastructure-led urban development has become one very, very important momentum. In the past, I think nearly 40 years urbanization process since 1978, China has opened its door to the initiated the urban reform for China. Okay, that is very specific to the Chinese context. And we use this figure to show that this ownership structure of the urban fixed asset investment in Beijing, and according to the figures, and in 2003 and 2012, that's how the state-owned or the foreign investors and the Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan enterprises really, the state-owned have very dominant role in 2015. And so far, we could see that the great leap forward in China's built environment urbanization was a result of capital switching, not solely within the local arena, but also on the global level. And China's unprecedented built environment urbanization had become one of the most salient destinations of global surplus capital that seeks for the value maintenance and speculation. So two major forms of the inflow of global excess liquidity have two characteristics. First is FDI, which means firstly, the establishment of and direct investment in urban development enterprises in China. Two is international financing. And second one is hard money. It's hard money. So these are the two, we say, liquidity of access in capital switching in an international market arena. So in that issues, when we mention excessive of the capital switching, we can also see the hard money, because the hard money flows quickly and is poorly monitored. So there is no well-defined and direct method or approaches to help estimate the amount of hard money flowing into the country during the period of time. So in 2010, Guo and Huang and Martin and Morrison, 2008, they have calculated the amount of hard money inflow as follows. Firstly, the change in foreign exchange reserves minus trade and sales bonds minus foreign direct investment. So this is the total hard money inflow. And secondly is the geographical distribution of hard money inflow minus regional variation and the city size variation, etc. So this is how the hard money really flows. And here's how the housing price, the stock market, and the hard money movement that can definitely show in 2010 at that period of time how this kind of in terms of fixed and excessive capital switching. So I want to touch the point of sustainable urbanization, which is a planetary issue. Well, if we put planetary urbanization, we can reconceptualize the urban. And the urban, as per, Le Wow, as I said, this is a dialectal term, which means this is a practice and the process of formation. And let's put if a totality, yet never unitary, that is over determined or singular. And this could utility or totality has yet, over-determined or singular, over-determined and singular. So the third point is a concrete abstraction on an extra reality and the concept of reality. And at the same time, immanent in all reality. So the planetary urbanization, if we put another, just like cone has two sides, this is an evolving problematic, concept. So if we go beyond the binaries, one is urban versus rural, the social versus natural. And so this could be a cross-scale translocality issues if we put planetary urbanization. And another thing is like if we really making a point like the China's urbanization. And they said that if we put this as a singular or totality issues, that planetary urbanization is seen in China. And it is kind of global phenomena. And the input of global resources, the capital and knowledge is input into the process of China's planetary urbanization. And China has thus been integrated firmly into the global circuit of capitalism and the global network of knowledge production and reproduction. The export of Chinese goods, capital, and the China development model, like we said, as we said just now, the manufacturing as the word factory. So, and also in the meantime, China has going out initiatives, and we name it as OBOR, right? So China's development and Chinese cities versus global sustainability. So that is a planetary urbanization, which we're seeing that clearly as a phenomenal growth in China. But in the meantime, dating back that period of time, China's current challenge is considered as a global challenge. So if we put at that time, this is a new normal. That is a slowed down growth, plus it is prone to burst the real estate market. The second challenge is sustainability challenge. That is equals to environmental plus the social justice. And we see the policy dilemma that is, for one thing, the supply side and the demand supply curve, which is complicated by the Chinese party state. So this is a policy dilemma. And all the housing bubbles, or we say urban bubbles, have occurred in several surveys, which has persisted as a major challenges to the country and even to the world, So this is how the Chinese grit and existing fellow challenges that has made the global a important point into the policy and developmental challenges in the meantime. So if we want to give this environment, economy, and society a kind of angle to make it, and I would say this should be between the environment, economy, and society. So in my thesis, I try to give new frame and reframing of sustainable urbanization in my book. Actually, this is in the pipeline. So the sustainable urbanization model have actually primarily concerns the harmonious relationship among, they how to say, the harmonious relationship among the population migration, the industrial development, and the resources exploitation and environmental preservation. So these are the three, pillars. For the urbanization bubbles, we can still see the economic bubbles, the housing bubbles, infrastructure development bubbles, land use bubbles, population bubbles, and industrial development bubbles. So these are the 7 pillars of the bubbles. And when we touch upon the concept of bubbles, we do have some generalized bubble concept. According to the modern economics, the term bubbles really refers to the price acceleration that outpaces reasonable expectations about the value or evaluating the assets or commodities. Put in another term, the underlying fundamentals, according to Flood and Holdrich in 1990. and Case and Schiller in 2003. So the paths at which the bubbles form in flat and D-flat appears to have accelerated since the 1980s. So bubbles really firstly originate and firstly appears as a term that do not only refer to the unreasonable growing up of price or of asset or commodity, but also the outpacing growth of investment, production, as well as kind of consumption in certain economic arena. So that is how we see about the series of remarkable bubbles. So we can see the Japanese Heisei bubble in the late 1990s, the dot-com internet bubble in 2000 in the USA, and the property bubble in 2006. So this is how the series of remarkable bubbles has been witnessed through the years. And until very recently, the bubbles are generally understood not only as economic or financial phenomenon, but also social, political, cultural phenomenon. And this has brought multidisciplinary interest in the bubbles phenomena has decade recently. So bubbles in the past have been understood primarily in financial economic terms, and this has received rational explanations of individual as well as collective behaviors. Some of the study of the researchers, scholars have focused upon the broader social and institutional dimensions of bubbles, and the use of bubbles has also exceeded the financial or economic field and has expanded to other fields such as the consumption bubbles, as we said, and the technological bubbles. And if we try to give another concept, another quite important, if you have some understanding, and you can see about this. The framework is intended to conduct a transdisciplinary and empirical study on the scale, the level, and the mechanism of urbanization bubble in China, which has explored the development and application of sustainable urbanization theory in a specific context. And this helped develop a context-specific sustainable urbanization policy framework to address the urbanization bubbles. So that is how the framework we took into. So before we give, the questions, what we're going to, the issues is how we really define and reframe urbanization bubble, and how is the bubble formed, and what are the consequences that is caused by this bubble, and how to reconstruct China's sustainable urbanization in both the theory and policy. So these are the 4 different pillars of this. One is urbanization bubble. The other is the bubbles formation, and then the risk construction of China's urbanizations, kind of theoretical and policy implications in this way. That's why we go on with this urbanization bubbles. right? So, well, as you could really find in the seminars of your, 5702, that questions, we can see quite a lot of scientific questions has been, initiated. Like we could ask, can scientifically meaningful limits or boundaries could be defined that would provide effective warning of conditions beyond which the nature society systems incur a significantly increased risk of serious degradation. So what is the unsustainable urbanization under the post-financial crisis context? And what are the main features and special expressions of this unsustainable urbanization? So that's the first specific question. The second one is unsustainable urbanization in China, the victim of a global financial crisis. Why and how does the financial crisis, as well as contractions, trigger the structural problems that long exist in China's urbanization and ultimately lead to the unsustainable urbanization? Can this unsustainable urbanization be serialized as crisis region or crisis-induced unsustainable urbanization? And what kind of policies such kind of urbanization issues be employed to handle the unsustainable urbanization in China? In particular, what are the differences between these policies and the general policies for sustainable urbanization? The second one is a historical review about China's urbanization bubbles. If we go through the urbanization levels of China, and we can see how the character of 50%, right? And then you would try to configure it or figure out what is 50%, right? What is urbanization level? So if we look at this in a global scale, the urbanization ratio among the world level, you see, and in 1846, the urbanization ratio is nearly 50%. The Germany is also entering into the 50%. It's at around 50% in 1982, in 1892. And America, France, they go in a similar either 22 and 1930s, I think, America and France. But Brazil, South Korea, and Japan, even until after the 1960s. But China was even later. That was nearly around 2008. The first day ever that China entered into 50% of the urbanization ratio. What does this mean? This means that the urban versus rural space occupied nearly half and half for this. And while if the word is urbanizing, China fastest, but compressed. And if we look at and compare the historical data, we can easily find that since 1978, the urban reform, urbanization ratio is only 17%. By 2011, is urbanization nearly 50%, but more than, I think. But Brighton in 1720s, only 20%, until the first Wout, as engineer, invented the engine, right, for trains. So the urbanization ratio is right at 40%. Germany was in 1860 is only 10%, but the urbanization ratio is by 1915 is nearly 38%. And for Japan, well, in 1889, that it is less than 2%. But the urbanization ratio in 2011 is around, in 1940s, around 37.5%. So from a historical perspective, China's urbanization during the post-reform period was developed in a much shorter history compared with the long histories of urbanization in Western industrial countries. And according to the post-crisis urbanization in China, that urbanization bubbles, we can see that, as we have mentioned beforehand, that there are a lot of ghost cities and towns that has been produced as excessive space production. So the financial crisis since 2008, China adopted a developmental, financing and launched a package of the counteractions, which were largely characterized as the government-led investment, or we also name as the state-led investments. The state-led investments. And the state-led investments has really met this as a kind of the use of urbanization of built environments through the land infrastructure leverage. You have heard about the land finance, right? Very famous for that, for the urban infrastructure land and leverage. And for those hyper investment projects, China has accelerated the levy from the industry and consumption-driven urbanization to the debt-financed urbanization. As a result, a series of bubble phenomena such as structural surplus of real estate supply, especially in third or fourth tier cities, the lower use rate of infrastructures and public facilities, as well as the accumulation of local debts, have been emerging in the post-financial crisis of China. So this is how, the infrastructure development campaign. So to counteract the financial crisis, China has launched a state-directed infrastructure development campaign. And the total investment in the infrastructure in 2009 and 2022, compared with that in 2008, has increased by 45% and 63% respectively. So this is higher than any peaks in history. For example, it could be 37% in 1998. As a result, some experts will hold the view that land finance and property market jointly hijacked the national economy to some extent. And this would describe excessive dependency of China's economy on land property-based finance. So in this context, we could come up with a solution that the magnitude of China's investment in infrastructure has also raised many concerns on the underused infrastructures, the efficiencies of investments, as well as the realistic and related government debts and physical risks. And so generally speaking, the projects are funded through the debt financing, which is borrowed mainly from state-owned banks and relying on the booming property market to pay back the debts. So as we mentioned again, that the overdeveloped built environment as their joint special expressions, there's emerged a large amounts of overdeveloped built environments all over the country. By the way, do you want to take a break, or we will start, keep on going, and we can have early finish of today's lecture? So which do you prefer? Do you want to take a break? Someone answered me. What's that? Oh, yes. Someone said yes. So in that case, then we can take a short break. You could go to the toilet and then we come back after around 10 minutes. We come back again. Okay, let me. Welcome back to the lecture room. Let's try to get back the urbanization Bible once again. Just wait a minute. I'm gonna do. Give me 1 second. Some students said that some canvas similarity, because this is technical problems. I do not actually know that this kind of fix the technological problems could. If you cannot retain, can you delete from the file? Someone asked me, the students like Mr. Chen, about the similarity, because I do not know how to delete your report. Can I delete your first one? I'll try later to see whether, otherwise you can use the other plagiarism software and to check whether they have some problems. Okay, so but so far before, according to my experiences, this could not be really fixed on my own. So I've tried to think about the other, is there any other solutions so far? Click one button, but realize the button has been muted. So sorry, maybe I just speak a while, but no voice. So let me try to share my screen. Okay, there we are. Because John's special expressions with their image, a very large immense overdeveloped beauty environments all over the country. And according to the survey by the Development and Reform Commission in 2013, 12 provincial cities and 133 prefecture cities plan to construct 50 to 200 new districts respectively. And the average planned land area for each of the new district is 63.6 kilometers, which is equivalent to more than half of the existing urban area of the cities. Among them, a larger proportion of new towns or cities are becoming ghost cities or vacant cities for own realistic investment and development. So besides, there are still numerous vacant or underused industrial parks, both because of hyper development and industry decline in recent years. Well, put another issue is like that is some of figures or tables you could see clearly that according to the location, the planning areas, and the different housing communities, these are the lists that used to be ghost cities and towns that is reported so far. And this is the growth of the new towns, which has built up in 35 major cities in the eastern, middle, and western parts of China in 3 historical periods. So that's how the, as you can see, the built up area has been, explored, expanded with the time. And from this photo, you can clearly see the unsustainable urbanization in China that really show the ghost towns. But in the meantime, in the rural areas, the lot of vacant villages have been formed in its own sustainable urbanization phenomenon in China. And in the context of the post-financial crisis, China's urbanization bubble is rapidly expanding, and part of the bubble has begun to appear and become the huge hidden dangers of China's economic and social development. So real estate has become one of the fields that is questioned with the discourse of bubbles. And the most recent soaring prices in property market were triggered by the fiscal stimulus program that is launched at the end of 2008 in response to the financial crisis. And the rapid growing of the property price raises grave concerns regarding the possible existence of the housing bubbles. So that is how the housing bubble problem originates. How to take the precautions against the bubble best, and how to deal with its possible aftermaths have become one of the major concerns for policymakers in China. So, and that is housing bubbles really make this, the phenomenon and effect. Piecing these pictures together, it is not hard to find that the bubbles in contemporary China are much more complex than pure economic or asset bubbles. So they actually have very much or extensive social, political, and environmental roots, and also has brought extensive impacts in these fields. For example, the property bubbles are not only caused by the speculative activities in both the supply and demand ends of property markets, but also relate to the long-lasting urban-rural dualism, which has squeezed out most of the rural migrants from the property market and hinder the emergence of robust market. So the traditional term of economic bubble cannot efficiently epitomize the present conditions in China. And a more inclusive concept and theory is urgently needed. And that's how the urbanization bubble, all that bring the challenge to sustainable urbanization. So if we put on ambiguously, according to the established sustainable urbanization, China's urbanization is unsustainable for the inharmonious relationship of land development and population increase, as well as the underutilization of resources such as the public investments. However, the established sustainable urbanization model has limited the capacity for explaining also policing and steering China's unsustainable urbanization under the post-financial crisis context. Therefore, to develop a meso level, we can see how, the massively, we would say that context-specific sustainable urbanization context would become a theory and policy framework. Sorry. That's how we try to build up the theory for this, in the end, the theoretical and policy framework, which is urgently needed. And according to housing bubble, there's some boom and bust. So China has 34 province level. This is overall. But for the housing real estate bubble, that is characterized by rising prices of land and real estate until the price increase becomes unsustainable. In the market reacts when housing prices take a dramatic fall, that we say the market crash. So there are a lot of market and housing inventory, and there's a typo here, too much. There's no buyers because the prices are too high. And China has over 64 million vacant apartment units. There's between a 4 to 7 year supply of housing inventory. And we can see if we loosely defined, a housing bubble means a situation where the price of housing that is rapidly increases due to the expectation of future price increases, rather than the changes in the underlying supply and demand fundamentals of the market. So if we put the housing bubble in China's context, a large housing price bubble has a dramatic increase in real prices, at least 50% during the 5-year period or 35% during the 3-year period, which is followed by an immediate dramatic fall in the price of at least 35%. And the small bubble has a dramatic increase in real prices, at least 35% during the 5-year period or 20% during the 3-year period, which is followed by an immediate dramatic fall in the price of at least 20%. And so this is the housing bubble in China. And according to Rehainer in 1999, which has defined the housing bubble as a deviation of market price from fundamental value of housing. And the dominant theory of asset pricing is that the stock markets are equal to the sum of expected discounted dividends. And when the market prices deviate from such fundamental value, then such kind of housing bubble might exist. So this is a value according to the fundamental value of the housing has been defined. So if we put the housing bubble in China's context, as part of China's stimulus approaches, the kind of herald donor economic model has triggered the aggressive real estate development in China, with a massive saving available for investment, versus a loose monetary policy responsible for such massive overbuildings. And this is the China's Ghost City has really talked about the growing theory and the indicators for that. And this is the data we can find from source of BEA and CMBA set between China and the US, that China is great and super savers that do not easily use money, but they save in the bank. So if we really look into where does the Chinese householders' money go, you can see that the majority of China's money go to the housing. That really spends 34.1% of money goes into the housing, okay? That's US consumer units. And the second pillar is the transportation. And the third one is, of course, is food, right? Food. And then it comes to the insurance and pensions. So these are the main, the money saving rate and how does that goes. So China's saving and investment rates are like either halfly saving, the other is investments. These are the two components. And how to measure the bubble. And if we look at this, compare between China and the United States, and this is how between the 2009 and 2010, right? You can see how the residentials and also the industrial bubbles would make this kind of bubble would contribute and composed of. So if we want to have a truly detectation, the housing bubble, and then we can look into this. According to FDW model, there are 4 quadrants, right? In quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. I have recommended this video for you to really look into the details. And if you look at the fundamentals in the housing market, and we can see how the changes in population and how the changes in their incomes and how the interest rates and expected growth rates of rental, and also the changes in the stock of housing space, the stock of housing space. So this is how, they look into the D with the total stock of space and the price per unit area. So for the price to earning ratio, that the PE ratio, how the housing and ownership and rent measures works. The common metric used to assess the relative valuation of equities. In order to compute the PE ratio for the case of rented house, divide the price of the house by its potential earnings or net income, which is the market annual rent of the house minus expenses that we say as the PE ratio, that equals to the price of the asset divided by the annual earning derived from the asset. And another one is the price of a property divided by any rental income derived from the property. So such kind of willing to pay for such kind of housing asset is the amount of income that the asset would generate. And the high PE ratio would indicate that the asset might be overpriced. That's the PE earning. According to Robert Shiller, his plot of the S&P Composite real price earnings ratio and interest ratios, the Shiller would warn that the stock market has not come down to historical levels in the mid-20s, which is far higher than historical average. People still place too much confidence in the markets and have too strong a belief that paying attention to the gradations in their investments will someday make them rich. But so they do not make conservative preparations for possible bad outcomes. So this is how that kind of price earning ratio and the bubbles would generate. And the second price is the price rent ratio, because the average cost of ownership is divided by the received rental income. So that means we divided and calculate price rent ratio equals to the price of the property divided monthly rent multiplied by 12. So that is how. So this is residential price versus rents that has been decomposed by this Hong Kong residential price index and rental index. The third one is a rental yield. If we measure this, and when use the measure used in the United Kingdom, is the total yearly gross rent divided by the housing price and expressed as a percentage. And this rental yield equals to monthly rate multiplied by 12 and divided by housing price, which might multiply 100%. And this is low rental yield may indicate overpricing. And the rental yield in the key countries would say that is go over the time. So that is how the gross rental yields enlarge the capitals and the dwellings. So PRI is also considered as a measurement of housing affordability. So if we put a PRI as to the price of the property divided the annual income of the household, if we push up, we said the increase of housing price that would exceed the increase of income, that is considered unsustainable. But the other housing affordability measurements and deposit to income ratio affordability index as a median multiple measures. So that's the PRI. If we really look at housing price to income ratio worldwide, we can clearly see the housing price to income ratio from how to say, yellow to red, going from the gray. That can see the different countries that would see the measurements. And the DRI is a debt to income ratio that equals to the monthly mortgage repayment of the household divided by monthly gross income of the household. The lower the DRI, the more affordable the house would be. So when the ratio gets too high, the households would become increasingly dependent on the rising property values to the services their debt would be measured. So that is how the housing debt to equity ratios was measured. So if we use the DII for the deterioration over the time, they would increase all the way, but decrease around 2014. The final chapter, what we're going to introduce is how and what are the consequences. Firstly, how did this happen? Well, so that's the rationale for the housing bubbles. The central government developed a loose monetary policy which fueled and fueled the increased borrowing by the local government. Well, the developers, builders, and the industrial company are all joined. And the Chinese government thought that a stimulus program was a good idea to kickstart economy and trigger investment and growth. So the rise in real estate prices was triggered by the credit infusion of 2009 to enhance the economic growth amidst the US financial crisis. So that's fundamental theoretical understanding is whether the FDW model works. And that's the Lin's model in 2009, the formation of housing bubbles. If we put down the way, each episode of bubble is considered as a unique because its causes may vary and case by case. So first and foremost, a bubble can never be explained by a single factor, but is the result of interaction of a number of factors, right? The multiple factors triggering such kind of housing bubble. Second point is the microeconomic situation and microeconomic policies, and that will bring along the structural changes in the economy and socioeconomic aspects. The third one is capital and credit market. And that would have triggering the beliefs, expectations, and plans of the actors. Last but not least is incentive of the individuals. So this is how the housing bubble formed. And in the meantime, well, once the housing bubble formed in the first beginning, that we would trigger how does the housing bubble burst. There would be shocks. There would be collapse of the other markets. The first one is some bad news or announcement of new policies. This is one shocking starting point, and then this would trigger people to rethink the housing fundamentals, and that would be re-evaluate and value the properties. And the second issue is collapse of the other markets. That is the stock and deteriorate markets, and this would diminution of wealth or endowment that triggering the housing demand that bring down the quickest selling of properties to maintain the liquidity, and this would help the foreclosed properties sold at a lower price. That will make and initiate housing price triggering and going down. So that is how starting the bad news would announce a new policy and with the housing price. And this would bring along the China's GDP versus the US GDP growth comparison. And then that is a stimulus part plan in housing boom. And another issue is the property and business cycle. Firstly, the capital investment is a key cyclical driver of economic growth. And second one is a new development, which equals to the key influence on the business cycle. The third one is occupation demand that is linked to the business cycle. The fourth one is the property market has become inevitably cynical. But there is a future factor, I think, according to development time lags, that is downlight commercial cycles. So firstly, the development lags would amplify the economic cycle, and the studies would conceptualize the property cycle by reference to co-op model and the role of development lags. The last one is a development type, different types of real estate have different cycles reflecting development lags across different stages. And this is a Boris model with economic upturn, economic boom, economic downturn, and recession, and then a slump again and credit squeeze. The interest rates will rise, and then credit boom, and this would trigger another credit expansion. And this Boris model has really reflecting the situation that would happen and potentially happen in the global market at the moment. As you can see, that a lot of the phenomenon has really making it coming into reality. Austrian business cycle theory, like they have the low interest rates that triggers to the cheap credit, and that will bring along the distorted expectations, and then the over expansion and mild investment, and then the bubble would create it, and then will bring along the rise and rising interest rates to slow the bubble, and then would have the bubble burst. After that, we have credit crunch, and then followed by the recession, and then lower interest rate. This is a cycle of a business, right? So that is how the system will last, only the Fed in the stats keeping low the interest rate, and that is how the business cycle will works. That is how we should pay attention, that we have to make sure, greatly how we should make this become a reality or the issues. And natural interest rate is a blue one, and that is the market interest rate is the yellow, and the red one. That shows the Austrian business cycle still really works, right? But as you can see, there's never a single factors would trigger the business, credits or the cycle. That's why we should comprehensive review of the theory. And that's how the blue and lower the cycles of war. I think that's all the full lectures of today, and see whether you have any questions. We can leave several minutes questions. There's students have some questions.
Professor, can you hear me?
Some students said the full file canvas is complete. I cannot download the lecture notes, right? The exam issues will be announced, I think, in the forthcoming 2 weeks, forthcoming week. That would be have more clear, photo or profile of that. So I may announce that in the next lecture about this. but I will try to upload all the lecture and notes for your attention, for your preparation. I hope that will be helpful for you. Any other questions?
Hello, Professor.
Any other
Can you hear me?
questions?
I have a question about the test and the examination, because we have seen the examination arrangement from.
Then I think that let me call this a day for today's lecture, and for the PPT or the tutorial, we will start maybe in 2020. There is one student asked about the cycle. Let me show you the cycle. Can you open your mic? What's your question? What do you mean by this cycle? Li Ming, right? Can you open your mic?
Yes, I want to see this picture again because I missed some information, and thanks for you show me this picture again. Okay, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Is this right? Li Ming, you asked you want to show the show the questions. Yes.
Yes.
So any questions, or you just want me to show this? Any questions?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear my voice?
I cannot hear. Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
No, I just want to say this in a picture again because I think I missed some the last part of the cycle.
Oh, okay.
So I want to do this again.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's enough now. Thank you.
Good. So in that case, I see you in 2020. Some student concerned about the examination, so we will use online examination again this year. So I would try to show some, perhaps we leave some time to test for some minutes and see whether it works. Thank you for your coming today, and see you later in the seminar. And all the lecture notes and lectures will be uploaded very soon. See you then. Bye-bye. Take care.